Welcome, everybody, to the DCM group. Do come Monday, the weekly source, our webinar, Renovate or Detonate, your pre-loved village or rack. What are the decisions and what is the information you require to be able to make better use of land that you may have or the plans of the future that you might have for that land? My name is Chris Baynes. I'm the CEO of DCM. We've got a 60-minute webinar for you and some spectacular speakers. Before we commence, I'm going to just do a quick run through of the landscape that operators of retirement villages and residential aged care are facing. So I'll just put share my screen. So we're here to talk about Renovate or Detonate, your pre-loved village or rack. Before we start, I'd like to just attend to residential aged care. Now, the primary purpose of this discussion, this webinar, is retirement living, but we cannot escape the importance of the role of care for our potential customers looking out over the next 5 to 7 years. So anybody who's looking to renovate or detonate, we know that it's going to be a long-term project. It's going to be 3 to 5 to 7 years. And therefore, we need to be thinking of what is the product that we're going to be developing and how appropriate is going to be for the consumer for out at 2030. And care is going to be an important element of that, as we're seeing with the emergence of assisted living and private aged care. Now, if we look at residential aged care, we have a major challenge in this country. Everybody would be aware that the level of development of new residential aged care beds is falling behind demand. And I point to this speech that was made by Annika Wells, the Minister for Aged Care, on November 1 last year in Melbourne, where she said the current number of aged care residents is around 200,000. By 2040, and that's in 17 years' time, will be close to 350,000, and this is despite the inevitable increase in home care. We can't sandbag against this tide. We must build structures that protect us, she said. She also said that what we need is an innovation in architecture, which is tipping her hat to the fact that retirement living is going to be providing more care support, home care support into retirement living. And the result of that is going to be new models that our sector, you, the operators, are going to be providing. Now, that was, I prepared this slide last week, and then today on the front page of the Australian, we had this occur, which is a call for wealthy residents to pay more for their aged care. And in that article, it was generated by a study done by Catholic Health Australia, which said that we need to be spending more than $48 billion by 2030 to create 80,000 new beds and renovate 61,000 new places. And that all requires cash at a significant level. And we're going to touch on that. And the question is, with innovative architecture, will that money be going into residential aged care as we know it now, or blends of retirement living and care? That's what we're going to be discussing today. So if I can start off to set the pace. The facts are, if we look at retirement villages across the country, we have 2,000 locations, but 65% of those were built prior to 2000. That's 1,300 villages. We need to have 5,500 new village units built a year to maintain penetration at the industry standard of 7%. But since 2008, we've only been building 3,500 units per annum. And when you consider that the average project is 7 years, you can see that we are just not coping with the demand that is coming forward, same as in residential aged care. So we have 1,300 villages that were built pre-2000, and many of those villages are not what the baby boomer will want in 7 years' time. So what to do? And that's the purpose of this webinar today. Then if we also look at residential aged care, we have the facts that we've got 3,000 locations. Again, 60% or 1,800 residential aged care homes were built pre-2000. And the demand is that we've got to have 3,500 market quality residential aged care homes by 2040. That means that we've got to be building 8,823 beds a year, or 75 racks. At the moment, at the valuation today, that's $3.5 billion investment that's required. But the problem is, at the moment, we're only spending $1.7 billion. So we're only halfway towards building the racks and aged care beds that we need by 2040. So if we can just put racks aside, but in the back of your mind, if we could be thinking about what baby boomers will be wanting in 5 or 7 years, knowing that there's going to be an element, a large element of care involved, there's a lot of money coming towards, and a lot of demand coming towards aged care retirement living. Then if we look at the landscape today, when it comes to renovate or detonate, at the moment, with those, because of the fact that we do not have product that is current and market suited, we are selling our aged care, our retirement village homes at an average price of 55% of the median local house price. This is from the 2021 PwC Property Council Retirement Census. And that's across 55,000 retirement village units. Just think about that fact, 55,000 retirement village units, and we're only charging 55% of the normal market. And the price is only going up by 4% a year, as you can see from that bottom graph, when residential home prices have been going up by 10 or 20%. And to demonstrate what this opportunity is then, if I look at, I searched out Bayview here in Sydney, and we see that Aveo in Bayview, which has a village which is at Bayview Gardens, which is about 25, 30 years old, they're selling a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom home villa, that photograph there, for $540,000. That's on the market today. And yet the median price for a 2-bedroom unit in the same suburb, Bayview, is on realestate.com this weekend for $1.19 million. So you can see the difference between a retirement village unit and a 2-bedroom apartment over the fence. There's a massive price gap, and therein lies the opportunity for the retirement living sector to utilize existing land to renovate or detonate, to release the value of that land and increase the revenue and the value of the assets for the operator. So if I just go back to this Annika Wells, she's saying we need to be building 150,000 beds. If we are to build 150,000 beds, we are going to need to be making an investment of $3.5 billion a year, every year between now and 2040, and the money has to be found to do that. If we look at the retirement living sector, we look at where we are with the aged care sector. In 2021, we built $1.7 billion. So we're only achieving 48% of the capacity. And with the speakers that we have today, and as we look forward, we would be suggesting that we need to be combining care beds in with retirement living, assisted living, and this all creates vast new opportunities for developers. So I'd like to now ask our panelists if they could open their cameras, and we will have a conversation with them about where we're going forward. And if I can introduce our panelists, we have Mahi, who is the principal of Stanton Dahl Architects, one of the leaders and with a lot of over 10 years experience in the retirement living and aged care sector. We have David Cowdery, General Manager Property for BaptistCare New South Wales and ACT. He's got a very significant property development program on his hands, as does Calum Ross with Levande, previously Stockland, now known as Levande, and got a very significant portfolio of about 65 existing villages, many of them over 20 years of age. And then we have Anthony Felice, who's the sector leader for aged care and retirement living at TSA Management. And we have Jeff Jones, CEO of Total Constructions, who would be one of the most experienced construction builders in the aged care and retirement living sector. So we have a fascinating group of people who have all got deep experience. And we're in a really challenging time because we have other competitors for builders, suppliers, and what have you. So I'd like to open up and ask Calum and David, if you could just give us a quick overview of your portfolios and how much of your stock you are perhaps reviewing with a renovate or detonate point of view. Calum, you can lead off as you've got the largest.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, we have 8,500 villages nationally, predominantly on the eastern seaboard. About half of them are probably approaching that 30 years old mark. So there's a real opportunity to review our portfolio from this point of view and see what we can do. Unfortunately, not all villages fall into the category of being able to fully renew, as we like to call it, but a large bulk of them do, and we see over time as catchments mature around these villages that an ever-increasing opportunity arises.
And how long have you been in the sector, Calum?
I've been working in retirement living development since 2008, and spent a lot of time looking in this space because I think it's one of the biggest latent opportunities the sector has at the moment with the age, as you've pointed out in some of those slides, the age of the villages right across the sector. And we see this as a big growth opportunity at Levande, and we'll be looking to have this as a key contributor to our growth over the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you very much. And David, what's your portfolio and how long have you been in the sector?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and good morning. So BaptistCare has around 4,000 beds or units. So we've got a mix of retirement villages, residential aged care, and social and affordable housing. Our retirement village portfolio, including the recent acquisition that was announced last week of part of the Tullage portfolio, numbers around 1,350 units. Our residential aged care is a bit bigger than that, over 2,000. And our social and affordable housing is just about to hit 650. So out of that 4,000 units or so, around 38% are greater than 25 years old. I guess that's the comparison with your previous slide, Chris, where you were saying that 60% of the aged care, residential aged care stock is pre-2000. And we would see that the older stock we have would generally be some of the older residential homes. But I guess the other side of that is that if with good asset management and with the right configuration, I think 25 years is not necessarily a use by date for a good asset. So there are ways that they can be they can continue on and have a longer life. But then when they get to the much older is where we really start to need to renew.
And with both of you gentlemen, when you're looking at an asset, when Calum, you started, it was about lifestyle in retirement living in the private sector. What are you looking at them now? What is it? Is it a lifestyle? Is it a care support? What do you?
Yeah, I think it spans across the continuum. There's still a place for lifestyle villages, but we are seeing an increase space for, I guess, more care-orientated villages where we either co-locate with aged care or have a very reputable aged care facility just nearby that we can partner up with. But certainly, you know, there has been a big shift in terms of our planning for villages around more of that, I guess, downsize and needs-based customer versus the lifestyle customer who have got a lot of options these days.
And David and Calum, what are the key components that make an asset qualify for a makeover, either a renovate or a detonate?
Well, from BaptistCare's perspective, we take a look at the occupancy, primarily occupancy, and feedback from customers. And so if customers are really not interested in the product because they might have other options in the market and they're really, well, they're not willing to pay a price that because they've got other options, that's a first sign. I guess some of the other aspects of older assets where you start to look at renovate or detonate are the increasing costs, so the repairs and maintenance and capex, and also new opportunities for planning. So you may have a site that has it may be a few decades old, and there's been a change in the planning controls or rezoning. Some different opportunities in the market, certainly in the framework of the suburb, in the market in the suburb, and there are drivers that then can start pointing you towards the need to redevelop or significantly refurbish. But I would say in many cases, with the change in the planning controls, the opportunity to redevelop can come up, particularly in Sydney metro areas.
Calum, your thoughts? What are the...
Yeah, from our point of view, it's really the village's relative performance against the catchment median, and that goes to desirability as well. As catchment medians grow, people's expectations on what they're going to get also grow with that as they come out of their larger houses and have the ability to downsize. So that's point number one. Point number two is the ability to densify the villages. It would be nice to be in a world where you could just replace one for one, but that is not obviously a commercially viable option for many developers. So we need to look at how much we can densify the village over time. And a lot of the older villages are only 1 or 2 stories. So there is an opportunity there to densify in a lot of instances. It's just the time in the planning framework, wherever your jurisdiction is, that really holds you back. And the third is really that desirability point and the occupancy, as David said, as you sort of start to see a decline as that desirability declines as well.
You've got a KPI, don't you, Calum, that says that if you can't double the revenue?
I don't want to give away all the secret herbs and spices, Chris, but yeah, there is a bit about the ability to double the revenue. That's the first hurdle, and then we look to how far we can drive up the density as well. And those two key metrics come together to sort of work through as to the commercial viability of an opportunity that we see. So that's our first kind of hurdle assessment that we do, beyond just also obviously talking with the operations people on the ground, getting feedback on the asset and some of the aging infrastructure needs that might need to be addressed over time as well feeds into that.
So when you say double the revenue, that goes to that slide that I had for Bayview, doesn't it? That
yeah.
By doing the redevelopment for the purpose of the audience, if you've got a unit that you can sell for $530,000, but by doing the redevelopment, you can sell it for 1.2 million. That has 2 benefits for you, doesn't it? One, you get increased revenue, but also the valuation of the overall asset on the block of land goes up significantly.
Yeah, and I would say across the national portfolio within the sector, that'd be a pretty common outcome in terms of that slide you showed.
And between the two of you, how many projects at this point in time would you be looking to renovate or detonate?
We're currently working through 4 actively, and we've got another 4 identified, and then there's a further 4 sort of out beyond that horizon that we're also looking at. But again, it does rely on catchments to mature to a certain point before you can sort of take that next step. And there's a whole resident engagement piece that comes with it as well that we've got to really be cognizant of, because that's what really makes or breaks the ability to do these renewals.
We might just talk to that before we move on to the other panelists, because we title it Renovate or Detonate. It is usually impossible to detonate, isn't it? A whole village. It is a renovate an existing village progressively or detonate small sections of it. So for the purpose of for the audience, what is your advice, or what is your experience in just briefly on how to go about that successfully?
We've at BaptistCare, we've had some examples of each actually, where we felt that the detonate and start again option for the whole site is really the best option, and best for the financial outcomes, but also the best for the residents. And so if we have a low density village, say in a metro area, and we're going to develop a larger scale commercial type of village, a vertical village, we've found often that the residents really, because we're going to be there for a long period of time, it's going to be very disruptive. it is best outcome in the long run for the residents to relocate. And so we've had that situation, and we've had a few situations like that through over the last 10 years or more, even before I was with BaptistCare, but even more recently. And we've found then that we can get better outcomes, but it takes a long time to consult with the residents and for that change to occur prior to the development. On the other hand, on a more of a lower density area, say in the regional New South Wales, we find that that's where you do have opportunities to take an approach of staging and moving residents around into the new units as you develop, and then slowly release areas of land of that estate. That's when you have a development that's going to be a slower take up and slower sales, and more of that staging approach over a number of years.
So the theme there, David, is a number of years, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. Number of years for any project, but for significant large capital projects, we're talking several years for planning approvals, feasibility and procurement and financial, I guess, capital approvals and so on. So then delivery. So it can be well over five years for a major project. For those regional projects, quite often the planning approvals will be a lot quicker. Councils are keen to see us redevelop, and they're keen to see the work and the jobs coming into the local area, and keen to see the product coming into the area. So it's very different depending on the circumstances of the location.
I was actually thinking more towards the management communication relationship with the residents, and whether you're assisting them to other locations or whether they're going to stay on location. That's usually a communication and PR role. That how many months or years would you advise on that?
Oh, well, I think the conversation has to start very early, and it's at least a year of just consultation and getting the trust built, having a conversation that can make the residents feel that you have their interest at heart, because it's actually, this business is all about the residents. And we sometimes think about these projects, but we've got to remember that it's actually, we're there for the residents and we're there for their well-being. And so every resident will have a different story, and they'll have a different concerns and worries about this, and they'll have family members. So you can't rush that. You've really got to take your time. So I would say at least a year just for that initial consultation and getting everybody used to it. And then you can start working with other locations you might have yourself, or other competitor locations where you may be able to negotiate for people to relocate. So it's certainly something that you need to allow a lot of time and money to do it well, is what we would say.
Calum, you had with Cardinal Freedman, that was both a Detonate and Renovate property. You've mentioned a couple of elements that you had, or strategies that you put in place to maintain a peaceful environment for the residents, such as having several entrances for the building construction. Could you just pass us through how you what that project was and how you managed it?
Yeah, I think it's really important that everyone's really transparent and upfront around what's going to occur. As David said, the preference would be to relocate people off site. That's not always possible. I did think of, during COVID, we should have bought up all the cheap cruise ships and parked them around the place so we could use them. But look, I think we need to, you need to be really transparent with the residents about what's going to happen. And there's a lot of strategies you can put in place around that, obviously, construction work times, which no doubt Jeff can talk to, but also, pointing out when noisy days are going to be. So in the beginning of a project, typically there's a lot of excavation that can create some I guess, noise and dust around the site that you need to be really cognizant of. And what we did was either have areas of respite within the village that were away from the construction, Or on those days, we also, for those that wanted to, did offsite tours. So we'd provide a bus service that would take people on an offsite tour to some location. We got really involved with the residents committee around what those opportunities were. So there's all sorts of things you can do like that, and put signage around the village telling people about what's going to happen, what the week ahead looks like, so that people can make their own choices around what they do, whether they stay in their village or they want to go elsewhere.
So, Jeff, if I could ask you, as a builder, what's it like to be either renovating or detonating in a community that is living there whilst you're doing it? What are the challenges from your point of view, and what would be your advice to those operators who are considering going down this route?
Well, there's certainly a different environment having residents in close proximity. And to pick up Calum's point, we've actually taken the novel idea of putting viewing platforms in and allowing the residents to actually inspect the construction work as it's going on. We've even inducted some of the residents remotely, but allowed them to actually feel part of the project. It's keeping them outside the safety boundaries, but it's really been an engaging process. And we've found that their prior careers come to the forefront when they've actually watched the construction unfold. But we also take a very serious approach with our supply chain, and we've developed a program called Aged Care Essentials. We run all our supply chain through that, so they understand what it's like to work in a live environment, what it's like to work close to dementia patients, and really have them feel very much engaged with the end user and making that positive difference to people's lives. So that's an extra than just delivering a construction project. There is a real feeling of connection within our business to the end benefactor of our work. And we find that we get more attention through that because people feel very much valued in delivering aged care for that reason.
From your experience, the residents is one component that you need to be having communication with. What about boards and early discussion with them? Because most of them would think that in today's world, you get a builder and you just go in and do it, but that's not the case anymore, is it?
No, managing stakeholders is a big part of it, right through from funders to boards to management teams. Certainly at the moment, it's a very hot construction market, and finding the resources to deliver projects, let alone cost escalation, all requires very much early involvement with the builder, with the contractor. We certainly encourage to be sitting at the table as soon as possible just to talk through those, because whilst there's a lot of work going into getting the design right and getting the aesthetics right and getting the model of care, it's really even in the case of renovation, it's very much what's behind the ceiling or walls that's important. That'll dictate a successful project. So getting in there and doing some due diligence on the existing village, and then really being able to update that board that you're mentioning, whether it be the property development board or the ultimate board, on some of the concerns around the existing village. The early contractor involvement model is probably stronger now than it's ever been. Having the builder sit at the table early with all the respective parties to provide that buildability advice early on.
Well, you made an interesting point there. I suppose when you go into an existing village, you find a lot of surprises.
You do. There's not only the surprise in the existing building, but there's also the fact that the compliance codes have changed. So whether it be fire and smoke compartments, whether it be the structural integrity to change model of care with bed lifts, all the way through to just retrofitting technology and running that through the spine of the building. All of those are behind the scenes. But doing a bit of destructive inspections allows those surprises. Nobody likes surprises. So to remove those surprises from the process will provide that confidence to the boards and the funders.
You say destructive inspection. What is that?
You have to remove some of the wall. You've got to remove some of the ceiling. You've got to get behind the scenes and have a look what's there. It can't be done just walking down the corridor. We need to find out what the structure of the building is. And that's they're only small inspection spots, but they're critical to provide that input.
And I assume you can't really even start a project until you've done that. So
ideally not. We've had a couple of projects that have developed in scope quite considerably once we started that investigation, and that was post being engaged as a contractor, and it really should have been pre. so that the advice and the surprises weren't there. And that's gone from identifying structures with termites all the way through to just penetrations not being sealed in the current building code. So yeah, it would have removed and probably allowed the allocation of correct budget funds for the project early on, and takes the tension out of the project as well, and mitigates the delay. Time is critical. So to get these villages or rooms or homes back up and running is critical.
So where this conversation is going is the importance of all members of the team being very early in the discussions at helping the executives, who then have to pitch to the board, I suppose. And whilst we're discussing this, we read about the difficulty of getting suppliers and what have you. For our audience, what is the latest situation? Situation that they can expect to see over the next 2 or 3 years, because that's when these decisions will be made.
Yeah, look, we'd hope there's a bit more balance comes into the market. We've got the COVID hangover, the surge of work, the government infrastructure, all of that's got to start to plateau out a little bit. So, but what we have learned is supply chain management has become critical. So contractors that have a strong supply chain management are able to find the resources adequate to do the project. So, Total's been in aged care for over 20 years now. So our supply chain know that they're working with someone that's been in the space for a long time, and that gives them a sense of confidence. So, but it's fundamental business. Manage your supply chain, manage the outcome.
Speaking of being in the business for 20 years, the bankers tell us that when they're approached for funding, the first thing they want to do is do a deep dive into the builder. Is that your experience as well? Yeah,
for projects that are bank funded, yeah, absolutely. We've had more visits from banks than we had from any other party over the last 6 to 12 months. So, and that's all been because they're now doing more thorough due diligence. So absolutely. And if you've shown a track record in delivering aged care, that's one of their ticks in the box. And also just keeping an ongoing engagement with, say, the top 4 banks keeps them aware of what we're doing. So, but yeah, they're sort of tightening their investigations, which is not surprising. And what is your advice to regional operators getting a builder such as yourself? You do go into the regions? We do. For our preferred clients, we'll go regional, and that just extends the early contractor involvement, because then you're also warming up the local supply chain to be delivering a project, and you want their engagement and support for the project. So it just means, taking up residents in the regional area, realising that you're supporting a local community in the regional area, probably more so than metro. So we do a lot more about community involvement, whether it be the sporting club or whatever it is that the local supply chain get involved in. But it's just a slightly different model, but it's still, again, caring for the supply chain and making them aware of the project coming through. Anthony, I was going to ask you, first of all, could you give an explanation to the audience, because we keep being asked, what is the role of a project manager? Because many operators or many executives have not embarked on this route before. So and following on what Jeff was saying in terms of different regulations and building codes and what have you, you play a vital role in that.
Yeah, I think to put simply, these projects aren't done with 1 or 2 people. There's large teams. So I guess the role of a project manager is really to coordinate the team, funnel a lot of that information and advice up the chain to the likes of David and Calum, or if need be, the executive and board members. Our role really expands all the way through from the front end business case. We help clients prepare business cases and look at strategies, all the way through to managing and coordinating consultants through design, planning, and obviously delivery. You mentioned planning pathways, and I think there's a real interest at the moment around the new housing set, the impact that's had on projects, timeframes. They're all big factors that need to be considered with the options of Renovate or Detonate. Some renovations are through complying or exempt sort of planning pathways, which means you don't necessarily have longer lead times. DAs with local councils, although they're pretty willing, David, we're still expecting DAs to come through after 9-12 months in some cases. And really now that this new housing SEP has lowered the threshold for state significant projects, so we're seeing a lot more retirement living and even aged care projects trigger SSD, which have a lot more consultants and a lot longer timeframes to deal with as well.
So in essence, when you're looking to renovate or detonate, if you're renovating, as Jeff indicated, there will be surprises. And your role, I assume, is to make sure that your client, the operator, but also working with the builder and those surprises are, decisions are made. Because we've all, renovated our own home and given ourselves a budget of X and it comes in at 3X and we go, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's pretty common. I think we're experiencing that you do encounter more latent conditions or some more surprises through renovations. But we work with clients and give advice around the procurement method, like Jeff mentioned. ECI, that early contractor involvement. I think you used the word destructive, Jeff. I like to say intrusive investigations, where we are taking sheeting off and having a look at what's behind the wall, so that you sort of know what you're getting into before you sign up on a sum of money and get into it. But generally, again, we'll advise of having higher contingencies to deal with some of those unknowns in renovations.
So between you and Jeff, what is your advice to our viewers in terms of if they're thinking about a renovate or detonate project, what sort of time frame should they be looking at for pulling together the expertise, building a case such that they can then go and look at funding and go to a board? What time frame are we looking at?
I think it would depend on the scale of the renovation or even the new development. But like everyone said, it's years. We often get approached with a thought bubble around, hey, I think we want to do something to this village. And we start going through the process and mapping it out, and it's years. It can be up to 5 years at some point. So yeah, I think if there's a thought about a renovation or some plans in the future, get on the front foot, get some experts at the table and map it out.
So Mahi, in your experience, what is the life of a new building today? If we're going to be building something new, what life would we be expecting for that building if the previous life was 15, 20 years, 25 years?
Thank you, Chris. So most buildings that we see today are either concrete or steel or CLT, which is the new thing now. I think we could say a comfortable life of 50 to 70 plus years is what we can see if it's a completely new build. But that's got its own, and then of course you can build in whatever you need in terms of development and the benefits of going new. Of course, you can, all that's come with technology, all the new things that have come of biophilic design and all the new things that are coming in, you can start putting that in. It can be more adaptive as well. Like we've all seen how buildings today, everyone's thinking today, in fact, has changed because of the way we work has changed, the way we buy things have changed. So we've realized we are in a very ever-changing sort of a scenario. So yes, a building would give you more life, but it's more important to also make sure there's life internally in terms of, like in a typical 50 to 70 year time frame for a building, it would see about 3 refurbishments, major refurbishments. So yeah, that's what I'd say. So about 50 to 70 years with about 3 refurbishments, major.
It was a trick question of mine. Therefore, if you're doing a refurbishment of an existing building, how long does that have a life, do you reckon?
Now that's a tricky one. I guess that depends on the scale of the refurbishment and how you want to do it. But I think it also comes down to the design. But prior to that, I do want to say this, like whenever we come across a new project request, for example, I've seen the tendency to bring it down to reduce the problem as much as possible. But what we tend to then do is force the team to actually step back, make the problem bigger. Because the bigger the problem, where you start actually seeing other things that could be a part of the solution, you realize the solutions that we come up with are much more richer and it's much more long lasting. So yes, so if you do a refurbishment, which takes into account all that goes along with it, along with that one solution. For instance, technology is not working. That's all right, but something else around the site's also not working for you. So make that a part of your solution when you refurbish. And I think it all comes down to also the designer, because it's a small thing, but if a designer can convince you that maybe you don't need to detonate, you know, maybe it's actually a perfect solution that you have here, which would answer all your questions. And I'd like to add a third term to this. Maybe it's not renovate or detonate, maybe it's innovate. You come up with something that actually solves your problem and arms you well enough to move ahead into the future for another few years.
The clients that are approaching you with these projects today,
Yes.
what is the ratio of independent living to care support is in their objectives? You know, we want to provide people with a nice environment, you know, a contemporary living environment, but the care component is perhaps more important because that's what we know they're going to need, and that's what we can sell, that's what we can get a better price for. Do you get those conversations happening?
We do get a lot of those conversations happening, actually, because when a client comes to us, and we get I think 50% of age racks as well as retirement living, but yes, it's more focused towards what's happening towards or where we are moving with the refurbishment of retirement living, where we're talking of continuum of care and, you know, delivering care. A lot of this is still unregulated though. So a lot of the things we're putting in terms of providing longer term care within retirement living is unregulated changes. We still don't have, we're sort of mixing BCA classes. I guess people who are listening in who understand this know, we're talking about a class 2 and a class 9C coming together. There's a lot of things that still need to be ironed out in terms of regulations in that space. But yeah, we're getting both right now, but more and more it's becoming care focused.
If I could ask the collective panel then, is there a view on what the consumer will want in 7 years' time? Will they want, because that's the peak of the baby boom is going to be in 7 years' time. That's what we're supposed to be designing today. How would we describe the balance of independent living and care?
I can go first if you like. I think that people will be looking for a place that they can age, where they can age there. People don't like the idea of having to move into residential care. And so I think they'll be looking for the services that can be provided as they age, but they may not need them when they move in, but they want to know that they can get that when they need it. And I think they want to have a good quality environment and a really strong community and an open community, not a closed community. I think they're keen to engage with the local community with cafes and recreation and things like that.
Yeah, to build on David's point, I think that idea of a more urban retirement village is going to come to the fore. I think people want to be close to their traditional amenity that they know, their health services they know, and not necessarily be pushed out to the fringe, which is the old model. I think that's going to be really important to how people see it. And obviously, as we spoke about earlier, the expectations are rising with that house price growth. You know, wealth is being created, so people want to see more and do more and have more. And the home care piece will be an ever expanding piece of the puzzle. So making provision for that's going to be critically important in all our new villages.
So would that mean, Mahi, that at the moment, an established village, 25 years of age, even in metro middle ring suburbs, they're a gated estate. They've all got big fences around them,
Yes.
One entrance. Going forward, does that mean to be part of the community, they're going to have to tear down, you're going to need to tear down those fences and open up the villages?
Well, I would like, before I answer that actually, Chris, what I want to state here is when a resident moves into retirement living, it is a choice, isn't it? they choose to move into there. But as they age, it's not necessarily a choice anymore that they want to continue staying there. It's a part of a natural progression. So, but what we want to do as designers and of working with providers is make that a choice even then at that stage, so they don't feel the need to look elsewhere, or you want them to be comfortable enough. And I think as designers and as providers, we can actually work that out if we have that clear right from the onset of the project. Sorry, go on.
No.
All right. And yeah, so I think it all comes down to, because the buyer today is quite an evolved buyer. There's been an evolution of the buyer. We do talk about the resident 25 years ago, but the resident 25 years ago today has mastered the use of internet, for instance. They love chatting. They want to chat with their grandchildren. So they have also evolved with time, so we need to be able to give them that and not treat that as a, try to create a setting which matches what they would have preferred 25 years ago, for instance. It still needs to have all the benefits and the evolution that they have become accustomed to in today's times.
So in essence, you're suggesting that whilst it's a community within a community, there's got to be a free flow between the two.
Yes. Well, more and more, we're actually finding it is going towards retirement living. Like, for instance, we just finished a project for BaptistCare, David Cowdery. There was an existing aged care facility on the site. This is in Red Hill. But the BaptistCare was quick to realize the opportunity and the alignment of purpose that there was for the site, for the surroundings, and for the people in the area. And they decided to actually proceed and put in a new offering, which was 100 retirement living units. The proof is these guys, BaptistCare sold pretty much 100% of that those units in quite a short period. And that sort of identifies how crucial it is for the provider to understand what's the need of that site at the right time, so they can deliver the product which which can sell and which can provide to the community.
A couple of questions have come in, so I'll just attend to these quickly because we're running out of time. One question is, for those organisations who have not embarked on such significant development previously and may have land but not cash, would you recommend partnering with a commercial developer as a JV? What are some tips and what are some traps? So the question is, we have the land, we don't have the cash. Is it a good idea to partner with a private developer?
I think there are opportunities to certainly partner with a private developer. We'd be keen to partner where the opportunity arises as well. It's obviously a trickier model for private developers to understand, and you've got to ensure that they can get a reasonable upfront development profit out of it to facilitate the delivery of it. And obviously the challenge with retirement living is there's no secured pre-sales within it. So from a financing point of view for private developers, it makes it very difficult. So you'd be looking for someone that's can inject equity and does not need debt financing to finance the development.
But Levande would be up for a discussion?
Happy to talk to anyone that's got land.
And you, David?
Oh, absolutely. And I agree. I mean, there's also plenty of ways of sorting these sorts of collaborative approaches out, different contract structures and different risk allocations and profiles. But I think Calum's point is a really good one, because you've got to look at the fact that retirement and aged care is a development for the long term. You're in for the long term, and it's a long-term asset management approach. And so if the equity partner is going to stay in that with you, you really need to be clear on your goals and outcomes of that partnership. That's really important.
Thank you. I think it would be fair to say that, to Calum's point, and I'm sure it's the same with you, David, land is the challenge, isn't it? As we were saying at the beginning, if you've got the land, whilst it is using the skills of Anthony and so on, and Mahi, you can go through the process of getting development applications in place, and that will be a several-year journey. but you need the land in the first place. So you've got, you mentioned you've got one at Caldery, Lords, if I remember correctly, Calum, that is an ideal piece of land for that.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're embarking on that at the moment. Unfortunately, they often require rezonings in those types of locations, so that's a very long process, probably 5 years if you're being kind, at the moment on the journey we've been on. But it is really they're brilliant opportunities to enhance the offering in those locations to match, I guess, what's changed in the surrounding catchment. So we're keen to explore those wherever possible, and also just in terms of partnering. You know, I think there's David said, there's many ways to cut it. You know, with the Catholic Church in Epping, we're partnering with them, where they're doing a 99+ year lease on the land, and we're building a tower there and a school and some other things for them. So, as to David's point, it depends what the landowner or partner wants, and there's many ways to work with that to get a solution that works for everyone in the long term.
Another question that we've had is that the two huge barriers are getting banks to invest in redevelopment and what to do with the current residents. So we're back to the beginning, if you like. In terms of the banks, my understanding is that the banks are very open to be investing in retirement living. They've got a preference in that area because of price escalations that are taking place. But by the same token, one of their priorities is making sure you have the right team, and thus the investigation of the builder is, you know, step number one. So would you agree with that, Jeff? Because you're at that coalface, and so are you, Mahi.
Well, firstly, you said banks. I'd be careful. Some get it, some don't. Some of them have got dedicated, aged care divisions, and I think they understand the mechanics a little bit better and are enthusiastic to fund in that space. And we've seen those particular banks come in through our doors a lot more. So, but sure, there is a passion to lend in a space that has a decent return for them, and that's simple banking. So,
and Mahi, are you finding the same, that the banks are positive towards the clients that you're working with?
It's been a mixed bag. I guess all comes down to how much we can convince the banks. And usually, especially when it comes to renovation, it boils down to how much time has been spent investigating. If it's a hurried job, it's obvious it's going to go pear-shaped as you move forward. While taking Jeff's points earlier, it is the investigation, and of course, Anthony's point. The more time you spend investigating, the more time you spend reviewing with the buildability expert, where you can actually, because we are architects, there's the provider team, but you need someone who can tell us how things will go once you start taking things apart. And that's where the construction arm comes in the picture. That's where the project management arm comes in the picture. And the more time we spend upfront, we find the process is streamlined in the future. And this, when you present this to the bank, they're much more open to sort of funding that project, because they can see the investigation, the whole gamut of investigation that's been carried on.
So if we can summarize that, there is appetite with the banks that are familiar with the sector, and there'd be at least 5 or 6 of those that are have, as you say, Jeff, have teams dedicated to the sector. There are operators and developers in the sector who are keen to JV for those organisations that know that they've got an asset and they've got to get an improved result out of it, but maybe don't have the corporate strength to do it themselves. But people such as Levande can step in and assist them to build a new asset, which allows them to continue to deliver on their mission in that local area, and they still have ownership of the land. You said a 99-year lease. So things are looking very positive in that area, but you need to have preparedness to do the homework early, as Mahi's saying, and be prepared for a long march. Now, what do we say about residential aged care, given the interest there, in terms of what is the appetite in across BaptistCare, Mahi, with your clients, of renovate or detonate residential aged care homes?
Well, from BaptistCare's perspective, Chris, there's always going to be a need for quality aged care. We are, though, along with that, it's a challenging sector at the moment for financial returns, and it's very challenging for workforce. So there are difficulties and there are headwinds, and that can make it challenging for new projects to be justified. But we've got we just agreed to start a new project in Elderslie aged care. We've got another one under development in Wagga, and we've just lodged DA for 2 more. So we're still continuing our pipeline. We believe in the sector and the system, but attended with that is also the move towards ageing in place within the ILUs and the retirement, and so that landscape will also change, and aged care will still be needed for those that can't live in their independent unit even with care.
So that's where sales in assisted living and private aged care would indicate that that's where the customer also wants to go. So would it be fair to say that you are looking at care delivery of what is today known as residential aged care is expanding into assisted care in a retirement living environment, as opposed to building lots and lots of more aged care beds?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, and we're certainly looking to increase our ratio of retirement village compared to aged care within our portfolio, so that especially with having both options available in the one location, so that if people can move into that location, they know that they can stay there for life, and they can stay there depending on their changing circumstances. And we're definitely looking to see how we can increase our capability for providing care within the ILU. And we're even doing a real strategy piece on that this year to really understand exactly how that's going to look in the future, because it's not 100% clear yet, I think, to the sector how to do this, and I think we need to spend some time getting that right.
Do you think there's opportunity, Mahi, Anthony and David, with the support at home program introducing higher level packages and therefore opportunities for increased funding in a retirement living space?
Yeah, I'd say so, actually. There is more support going for the home care packages, but I guess home care doesn't still take away the loneliness that comes with aging. And so you still see people wanting to move into retirement living and accessing the home care packages. But going back to your earlier point, Chris, aged care will still be around, though. Maybe it'll become more transient in comparison, considering people want to spend more and more time in retirement living where their care needs are met for longer. But aged care would still be around. It would be more acute, and I guess that sort of puts more pressure on designers as well, because it gets more and more closer towards being a very transient space.
Well, that goes to the point that when you're looking at developing new retirement living accommodation,
Yes.
you know that you're going to have people with higher acuity in their aging journey.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to, and that goes to what you mentioned earlier, adaptive design and so on.
Mm.
We're just coming up to the end of 60 minutes, but I have one question and one statement of sorts. The question is, what can operators, and Jeff, you might be able to help us here, what can operators be doing to be more proactive to secure building costs now and mitigate price escalations in the building and the construction industry?
Well, I suppose the answer is in the opposite. Making emergency purchases or urgent purchases will only put you at the pressures of market. So knowing what the materials required for the job are allow a little bit of front purchasing. But there is indications that some of the key indexes are starting to flatten out. I don't expect them to return to lower levels, but the scaredy cat factor of the escalation we received recently is starting to show a little bit of dissipation. So, but if you understand the materials required in the job, it makes it a lot easier to plan the procurement. Simple as that.
have you got anything to add to that, Anthony, as you're the keeper of the dollars?
Yeah, look, I think probably just coming back to the way the work's procured. There's different types of contracts. Some builders are more open to those contracts than others. But we're in that I guess position where we work with clients to look at the best approach on how to procure builders to alleviate some of that risk.
Okay, well, look, we've come to the end of our hour. Thank you very much for your time. If I can summarise, we have a wealth of land and buildings out there that are reaching the end of their life from a marketing and sales perspective, such that 55, we're charging just 55% of the value of the same property over the fence. So there is the opportunity to release that value, double that value, double that revenue for Calum by either renovating or detonating. But we are dealing with residents who are in situ, and that is they're the priority, as David outlined, and that is a medium-term partnership you have with the residents, which takes at least a year to set up and then work with the residents. In my experience, developers like Levande and so on will actually establish a team that will look after work with the residents for the period of the renovation or detonation. But the opportunity is significant, and the new customers are there. And so it's a bright future. So just to prove that it's a bright future, as we sign off, we have a gentleman whose name I'll share with the panel after we leave, who said, "Would be interested in talking to the various presenters about a project in Katoomba. We do own the land." So I'll share that with you. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
We come as a consortium.
Mahi, thank you for your time. Anthony, Jeff, Calum, and David, greatly appreciated. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.